audience members, thank you for joining us again for the Child and Family Justice Initiative podcast. I'm your host, Sal Guardiola. I'm the Relations and Engagement Manager for the CFJI. And I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your continued support, for your financial partnership in keeping this program going and keeping this program growing. So as you may have seen, I got my pink tie on. Happy Valentine's Day. And we are doing a theme for the beginning of 2020 of focusing on the Marshall Brennan Constitutional Literacy Project, aka I Love MB, especially with Valentine's Day. I have the privilege today of having two of my friends, my colleagues, former classmates, and former director and current director of the Marshall Brennan Constitutional Literacy Project, former director Eduardo García, and current director Lalita Moskowitz. Thank you both for coming on the show.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks.
I feel good to be here.
Oh, great.
Absolutely.
What's it like being back at the law school? Lalita, you come here to teach. You were teaching all last semester, and then you were teaching before.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, once you get past the PTSD of being a student, everything's fine. Yeah, it's cool being back here.
It's remarkable how quickly it feels like a long time ago. Someone had to tell me how to get to my classroom where I was teaching at the beginning of the year. I was like, I don't think I know where that room is. So it's remarkable how quickly it feels like a long time.
Yeah, I remember when, and I might have shared this on the show before, but the first day that I came back to work here, I was like, wow, I used to get slayed at this law school, but now I'm going to get paid at this law school.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's a nice feeling. So we'll get into it. I know that we have limited time, and I want our viewers to hear as much from you as possible. So my first question for both of you is, what first drew you to the Marshall Brennan program?
I can start. Definitely. So I think my 1L year, my first year of law school, I found it to be a very isolating, jading experience. Sort of the panic, at least for me, and maybe others of, you're being cold called and am I saying the right things? And it was sort of, very stressful environment, very isolating again. So I was sort of looking for options, for possibilities of sort of taking all these things that I've been learning and sort of, being out there with the community. I think the law school can be sort of a bubble, right? Very Definitely. Insular in many ways. So I was looking for, some ways to reconnect. Certainly, I come from a teaching background, from a community activism background. So I wanted to get back out there with the things that that fed me energy and that kind of thing. So I talked to people who had been involved in the Marshall Brennan, and I thought maybe this is sort of the outlet for that energy and these new possibilities with the things I'm picking up in law school.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of themes that are similar for me. I had done a lot of work with young people before in a previous life, before I decided to come to law school, and something that really gave me energy and made me sort of feel connected and hopeful. Young people always have interesting different perspectives and hopeful, but also I had spent a lot of time working with young people who didn't have a lot of opportunities necessarily or had a lot of barriers put in their way, and being able to see those students, you can give young people a little bit and they can grow so much with that. And so when I came to law school, I was really feeling that it was the right decision, but a little bit of loss of the opportunity to work with young people so often. And then I learned about the Marshall Brennan program, and I was like, perfect. I don't have to stop working with young people. And really, I love the idea of giving people in that sort of age range the power to sort of know that they have rights and choices and to feel like they can have some control over their lives, because I've seen that be so powerful in other contexts. And so the Marshall Brennan program felt like a way to bridge my budding law knowledge with that sort of previous passion for working with youth. And so I was so excited that it existed.
That's awesome. And so if I'm not mistaken, both of you got started and involved with Marshall Brennan in year one. Is that right? Year one of law school? Yeah. Okay, that's what I thought, because I jumped on in year two, and I remember both of you were seasoned veterans. And if I'm not mistaken, you may have come to our class, or at least the info session, to give us the overview of what we could be expecting. But that's one thing I really love about both of you, is just your heart for young people and really your desire that what's been given to you, you want to share it with others, especially those who may not have the direct access to it. So it's really cool. What was it like for you, Eddie? It's now been a year since you've been in the director position. Tell us about the what it was like for you to be approached to take on that position, to be in that position, to be an official professor at UNM Law. Talk to us about that.
Right. Yeah. So it was sort of an interesting time because I was prepping for the bar at that time, and it's just so much stress. You don't have time for a lot of things, and so I was really excited. I was very humbled, of course, by this opportunity. I talked to all the people that had been involved or connected to the Marshall Brennan program in some way. So yeah, I took on the challenge again. I thought I could do really good, especially based on my background teaching as adjunct professor of different universities and stuff. So I welcomed the challenge for sure. The timing was a little bit weird just because you're taking the bar and then you take the bar and then there's just a few weeks before the beginning of the semester. So I jumped on board, and I think the way at least that I see the program, it's two components. One of them is like programmatic, like getting in touch with schools, with teachers, sort of expanding the program that way. And then the other component being, getting ready for class and, the administration and pedagogy of the class itself, of the seminar for the fellows here at the law school. So I think my biggest concern was don't mess it up. Don't have the program implode, right? Because it'd been established, it'd been around for 5 years at least.
Sure.
And I think it had quite a reputation amongst our community partners. So I think I put most of my energy, my focus on continue to grow those relationships, on keeping the program afloat and that way and expanded. And I think one of my goals was to, for example, organize our biggest regional competition to date, and that's what we put a lot of energy and effort into. So it was great. It was exciting. It was exhausting.
Oh, I believe
Very little free time for sure. Right, being a full-time attorney, and then prepping for class, answering calls, getting back to people related to the program, and that kind of thing. So very stressful in that way. But at the same time, you go to the seminar class and you have these materials and sort of push and challenge law students in ways that they were not expecting.
Sure.
The way I approached my class was very multidisciplinary, bringing a lot of critical race theory, critical Latino theory, critical white studies, critical pedagogy, that kind of thing, and sort of pushing us as lawyers and as law students on how we think about the law and the communities that we're trying to serve. So it was quite a growing experience for me. As professionally, certainly, for sure.
That's so good. And you raised something else, that you did that all as a full-time attorney with the New Mexico Immigrant Law Center, for whom you still work. And Lalita, you're teaching while also a full-time attorney with the ACLU of New Mexico. So talk to us, Lalita, about the approach. I mean, I think a lot of Marshall Brennan, when I think of the directors, is kind of this element of standing on the shoulders of giants, because you have these passionate people. I've noticed that, at least in my time in law school and then knowing both of you, this program and the opportunity to lead the program attracts people who are passionate, who they believe in it, and they really throw themselves into it. And that's been you, Lalita. And so I'm interested to hear what your approach has been throughout this past year in terms of instructing students, in terms of what the message you want to convey to the young people of our state, particularly Albuquerque, what that is. And I've also been grateful to be both a spectator to it and participant in it. But go ahead, please.
Yeah. Ooh, that's a big question. I think, so Eddie and I talked when I took on the position, we got together and I asked him, what have you learned? And he was talking about starting when he was studying for the bar and all that, and I was like, oh my God, that is, I thought this was a stressful start for me. So standing on all kind of giant shoulders, coming into the work and trying to be, for me, this is a personality characteristic. I tend to just sort of jump into things head first, and then later I'm like, oh boy, here I am in this thing that I'm doing. So I tried to be a little thoughtful too about not wanting to reinvent the wheel or try to be too ambitious with sort of changing things around that first time, especially because I came in late, but also bringing myself to it. Eddie had really great advice when we talked that to bring myself to the seminar and to sort of make it what I wanted it to be. And so that was excellent advice. And so I did, I brought some of my background. It's different. I've taught high school and middle school. And so teaching law students, I was like, all right, y'all, I was you not super long ago,
right.
So let's just, start from there. And then really, trying to get them to think about the law critically. And also, you don't get a lot of opportunity in law school, especially in the early years of law school, to think critically about the law and how it applies to different people and how it serves or doesn't serve different communities, especially communities of color or low-income people, or how it applies or should apply to young people. No, rarely do you get asked, I think, in those first years, especially of law school, like, how do you think the law should be or apply in these circumstances? So I really wanted to focus on that for the students and just spend a lot of time also focusing on making sure they felt comfortable in their high school classrooms and had the support they needed in those classrooms. And got to see this parallel. When I did the program as a law student, you see the high school students, some of them are a little shy or a little nervous, or it's the unexpected students who end up really shining through. And I got to see that parallel a little bit with some of the law students where they were really nervous about teaching or they didn't think they knew and ended up really becoming these like excited, confident teachers. And so that was neat to see that parallel.
That's awesome. What's it been like now? Because we have high school students from the regional moot court competition who are going to be going on to compete at Rutgers, right? And how hands-on or how much have you just delegated to the law students in terms of preparing our high school students who will be representing New Mexico?
I gotta say I'm still actually figuring out the right balance there. That's one of the things transitioning into the director role, especially not so long after I was a student myself. Right. It's interesting to navigate where my role is. And I think I need to draw in more of what I learned to do really well with young people when I was teaching is really giving them the opportunity to rise up into things and to remove myself as much as possible and give the law students that opportunity. So I'm finding that balance. I'm really enjoying working with the high school students.
That's awesome.
It's one thing about being the director is you're then one step removed from the high school students, so you don't get to see as much of that, except for at the regional competition. And then now working with this great group of high school students. So finding that balance, I think, but our law student fellows, such a great class this year and every year, I assume. And so they're really enthusiastic and committed, and I think it's going to be a really great, even our first couple practices have just gotten me so excited.
That's awesome. And we have 6 high school students, right, representing New Mexico?
4 now. A couple of them weren't able to make the trip, unfortunately.
Gotcha.
We did have, 6 selected initially.
Okay, that's so good. What are the dates on that?
We're small and mighty. It is the last weekend in March. I think it's the 26th through the 28th.
Okay.
Don't quote me on the exact dates, but it's the last weekend in March.
Okay. I asked because I'm thinking maybe we could get the law students and maybe even the high school students to come on the show and talk about their hopes, what they're feeling heading into the competition.
That would be great.
Yeah.
And we're going to get to do a little bit of extra stuff this year. So Rutgers, I don't think I realized this before, is right near Philadelphia. So we're going to get to spend a day in Philadelphia before the competition with the kids. And we actually raised enough money. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everyone.
Yes.
Donated.
Yes. Your support matters. Truly, we can do more together.
To be able to do some things in Philly. And we're actually going to take them up to New York City for a day after the competition.
Whoa, that's awesome.
That's awesome, yeah.
So, because we're right out there and we're like, wow, what an opportunity.
Yeah.
So really
cool. That is so good.
Yeah.
So good. What about for you, Eddie, when you think back on your involvement in the preparation process? Because I think for more of an aerial view, when I consider the high school students who are representing New Mexico, on the one hand, they're getting the experience of a lifetime. And I think on the other hand, I'm not sure if they realize it or not, maybe you could speak to this, is that they are representing our state. They're representing the young people of our state. And of course, we don't want to put so much pressure on them like this is on you, but it's really an honor, I think, if approached from that kind of perspective.
Absolutely. I think you're right. And I think as like the director of the program, you're like sort of removed from it. And you don't know who you're going to get, right? There's this regional competition. You have these judges who like say these are the people we think are best suited for representing New Mexico. So you don't really know what you're getting, and you really don't have a relationship with those students yet, those high school students yet. So I think the first few weeks when you meet them while you're prepping is when you begin to build this relationship with them, and you begin to like try to figure out where are their talents, where are those intangibles that you can like hone in.
Yeah.
And where are they lacking? Maybe they don't remember the facts of a case. Maybe don't understand case law so well, or the test, or whatever it is. So sort of figuring out where everyone is, at least for me, was giving ownership to the Marshall Brennan Fellows. These are your students, right? These are people you know and you work with. So sort of assigning roles. Who wants to take on this piece? Who wants to do this? And, you know, whenever, you know, they got stuck or something was, you know, a little bumpy, then I would come in with, of course, my experience in teaching and, you know, having done coaching for Marshall Brennan at least 2 years previous to that. So, you know, coming in and, you know, moving the team forward. But absolutely, I think the kids are really excited. And then, but you tell them, all right, you are going against the best students of other states. Mm-hmm. And you can see like the change on their face, like, wow, all right, we better bring it.
Yeah.
And I think I was talking to you earlier about this at the competition, because each week you're practicing and some practices are like great. We made a lot of progress. Other days are like, you know, not so great. Like maybe frustrating for me, at least, as, you know, wanting these kids to give it the best shot or whatever. But once you arrive at the competition, there's nerves, right? There's anxiety. Yeah. But once they get going and you know, the competition starts and they go through their first round or whatever, you really see that it pays off. All these practices, like, oh, they got it. And it's just amazing to see, you know, like all the potential they had in them and just go for it and deliver an amazing argument. Yeah,
that's gotta be so special.
Yeah, and in the competition, so there was one national competition that Eddie and I were at together as students, and that sort of experience, like our students, they were nervous, and then they were so good in the competition, and we were so excited, and they felt good, you know. And it was like even students who didn't advance to final rounds but they felt that pride in what they had accomplished, and it was so great to see that. I mean, I get all emotional talking about it.
Well, I think about that. I think about that the word impact comes to mind simply because if Marshall Brennan didn't exist at UNM School of Law, our state's law school, then this opportunity for students to get their feet wet with a moot court competition, because I know for me personally, I had heard about mock trial, and I understood, you know, superficially what that entailed, but moot court was a brand new term for me when I got to law school, of it being sort of a mock of an appellate argument. And so I just think about how if we weren't here, we being the program within UNM School of Law, that these high school students wouldn't have this opportunity to go to Rutgers and then go to New York City or go to DC the year before. And so they're getting these experiences that, whether they realize it or not in the moment, are shaping their future, are shaping their outlook on life, or shaping their expectations for possibility in the future. Which brings me to this. I wanted to explore this with both of you, because both of you are visionary individuals. Like, it was very intentional that you were selected as directors, and I think about just memories I have of both of you in law school, and it was like a healthy level of idealism that both of you carry, if I can say that. And let's possibility think real quick. Where would you love to see the Marshall Brennan Constitutional Literacy Project at UNM School of Law go from here?
Yeah, you know, there's so much. And part of what is a big focus for me in this next year is recruiting more law students to be involved, so that we can be in more high schools in Albuquerque. Mm-hmm. Long-term vision is I would love to have some kind of version of the program in other parts of our state, in rural communities. And it's tough because we're the only law school in the state, and you can't necessarily, I mean, law students have their studies.
Right.
But I was just talking with somebody about the idea of maybe trying to partner with attorneys in the community and train them at least to do some maybe know your rights presentations, or just maybe starting, you know, this program, I feel the same, you know, when Eddie said, oh, I just don't want to like mess it up. I feel very much that way, and I feel very protective of the program. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to expand it too quickly or unthoughtfully.
Sure.
So certainly like expanding to more high schools in Albuquerque and being in more spaces here. But I just, I dream big. I get carried away with my big dreaming. But I would love to sort of continue to expand to other places.
Yeah, I think I second every word of that. When I was director, at least I at initiated communication with some of the surrounding pueblos, for example, and sort of figuring out how we can serve, beginning to like build relationships. But I think, growing the program, building the capacity here, recruiting more students, to have that ability to go to more local schools here in Albuquerque, at least. Certainly, for sure, because you can see the need, right? There's a palpable need for young people in our state to know their rights, their constitutional rights in police encounters, and have them be confident whenever they experience police harassment. So absolutely. And
part of the program that I don't think I necessarily recognized as much as I have this year, or thought about as much as I have this year, there's the content and the rights, and that is so important. And then the oral advocacy component and learning how to make an argument and advocate is such an important skill and such a valuable skill for the students, I think, too, being able to communicate in that kind of way. And so thinking about ways to, even if we can't necessarily do the full program in places, but sort of bring some of that to folks. But and the law students too, which we focus on the benefit to the high school students, which is right and correct.
Sure.
But this is a program that is such a benefit to the law students as well. It was for me. It really grounded me in the real world. Eddie mentioned sort of that, being in your community outside of the bubble, thinking about the law in different kinds of ways, and giving back and working with high school students, I think really is a benefit to the law school students as well. And so this is I'm working on my pitch for when I recruit more.
Let's go.
To join us. But yeah, so really hoping we can expand in those ways.
And you said something really interesting, because it's also very interesting to see the law school students come into the classroom like excited, I've never taught. What am I supposed to do? Like sort of feeling lost. And as the semester progresses, like they really take ownership of the students, of their students in their classrooms, and they really just dive right in and just become immersed in the whole MB experience. Yeah.
So any students who are watching this, do Marshall Brennan.
Yes, I second that.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
One of your best experiences in law school, for sure, will be Marshall Brennan.
Yeah. I know. I was telling that. So I did our Heart of Meal program interviews for ACLU, but I was also low-key recruiting for Marshall Brennan at the Mixer. And in one of the interviews, because somebody mentioned it, then I was like, look, I know I'm biased at this point, but it was actually probably my favorite thing that I did in law school. And you know me, I did a bunch of things.
It's so true.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I love that, and I'm totally on board. I honestly will admit this is a table full of bias in favor of Marshall Brennan, the Constitutional Literacy Project.
We're big fans.
And I think that even if this sounds like material or subject matter that someone isn't necessarily drawn to on that basis alone, I think the program itself lends itself to individuals who want to serve. So someone came to law school with a public interest mentality or a social justice mentality, or wanting to empower others kind of perspective. I think back to my team, and I may have been the only one with somewhat of a teaching experience background. Nevertheless, because of the heart that my colleagues brought to the table, they were able to jump right in. And I think that in this case, at least, maybe it's not true for every classroom experience, but in this, if you bring your heart to it, then you're going to succeed. And so regardless of whether you come to law school after a career in teaching, or you come to law school and that your oral arguments your first semester were the first time you ever stood in front of a crowd, if you bring your heart to Marshall Brennan and you sincerely care, you're going to thrive, and you're also going to be blessed in the process, because these kids they're inspiring. They truly are.
Absolutely. And one of the things you asked about my approach to the class earlier, and I babbled about various things, but one of the things that was important to me this semester was to make sure that my law students, the fellows, felt that they were resources for each other, and could be sort of a team and help each other out. Those who felt more comfortable teaching or maybe had some experience could support, and just really creating that opportunity for them to make each other better.
Yeah.
And we can ask them how well I did at that. But it felt like there was some of that support between the students that I think is really valuable.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think that touches on the fact that the relationships being built and strengthened during law school. This is a great space to do that, because I think about us at the table, right? We were all in Marshall Brennan the same time we were in law school, and so our connections run strong. I know I can rely on both of you in your areas of expertise and vice versa. Although you are more expert than I am, so there's more. It's not a 50-50. I'm definitely taking advantage of both of you, but
you're being humble, especially since we were just talking about off camera how much you've brought to the Marshall Brennan Constitution Days and competitions.
I appreciate
these past couple years.
Well, it's been a privilege. It's been an honor watching both of you in your flow. I love that phrase, like in your flow, right? Because that's when you've hit that space where you're working in your passion, and that's a major component of the Child and Family Justice Initiative overall for the students that we're admitting. And it's really neat because I watch on Constitution Day or at the regional moot court competition, I'm seeing these young people, and I'm just like, it's like there's this big glowing sign that says pipeline, pipeline, pipeline. How do we get these kids into our classrooms? Because we want to make sure that the law school, the diversity of the law school is representative of the diversity of our community, and this is a direct way in which that's happening. So I want to know, for you, Lalita, what have been some of the most memorable or rewarding moments leading up to this point as in your director capacity?
Ooh, yeah. There's a few, with the students, the law students. There was a couple of folks who were really nervous and sort of expressed that they were really nervous about teaching. And this was great. We had a guest that Eddie recommended, and we did a little orientation, which we didn't do when I was a fellow, a little orientation and sort of got some information for them about how to teach. And then they were nervous, but one of the students who was the most nervous, maybe a week or two in the second year, was telling this story about how they connected with their high school students. So they were sharing in our law school classroom. And sort of were telling, and it was a rocky start, and they were like, oh man, they don't like us that much. But then they sort of had a moment where they like really got through to the kids and connected, and there was this energy. And as they were telling the story, and they were talking about what they were doing that day, and I was like, nice. And then they were like, and then they were also engaged, and they got so excited. And so I had this like, it was like nesting doll sort of enthusiasm. I don't know if that's right, but like the kids were enthusiastic, and then the fellows got really enthusiastic about the kids, and then I was all enthusiastic about the fellows being enthusiastic, and it was like,
escalated
this like
quickly.
sort of escalated quickly, ripple effect. And reading some of the students' evaluations of Constitution Day, they were really into it, and had a great time, and then seeing them at the regional competition, and it was so great. So many of the regional competition competitors had friends who came with them from their classrooms to come support them, and they were so sort of like proud, and hearing them sort of give each other pep talks in the forum, before their classes. And that was the first. I hadn't gotten too much interaction with the students, and so then getting to sit up in the reporter spot at the final round of the competition, and seeing those kids who did the final round just shining. And I don't get to see sort of the progressive progress as the director, so I just get to see them like show up and be awesome at the regional competition, which was the cool kind of perspective too, and watching their fellows be so proud of them. So those have definitely been some of the highlights thus far, and I'm really excited for our trip in March.
Yeah, and you bring up the final round of the competition, and I just have this vivid memory of because you had some great judges there. What was it? Judge Browning, Chief Public Defender Ben Bauer, and there was one. It was appellate court judge, I think.
Judge Duffy.
Judge Duffy. That's right.
She stepped in. Really great, volunteered last minute when somebody else was sick and wasn't able to make it. It was a good panel.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I just remember Judge Browning with his straight face just grilling these students. I'm like, man, I'm glad I didn't have to do that in year one of law school for my oral argument,
I know. Yeah. And they were so good, right? They were so good. And I was like, all right, if you can handle Judge Browning, you're ready.
Yeah. Oh, man. Eddie, I wanted to ask you, you work with the New Mexico Immigrant Law Center, and I'm interested if you could speak to how Marshall Brennan, an experience like Marshall Brennan, informs your practice, or perhaps even how NMILC informed your leadership as director, maybe both ways.
Right. Yeah. No, I think certainly there's an intersection. In MILT, we work with community partners. That includes local nonprofits. That includes schools. So in my role as director, I was often in the place where some of these students that we were serving were also clients of MILT. These were people that I had some contact with as our clients, sometimes even directly. So, and you know, of course, maintaining that privacy and not, you know, letting our fellows know that. So certainly, there was a lot of that.
Wow,
for sure happening. But I think more directly is, for example, heightened ICE activities in New Mexico, especially recently. So, and you see that need for know your rights presentations, for getting out there and informing the community. You have rights, and these are your rights before the police. These are your rights before ICE. So I think Marshall Brennan really comes in, the program itself comes in and fills this gap where people, there is a huge need for people to have access to, you know, lawyers or people with legal knowledge to some extent. And part of that is, what are my rights when I'm being confronted, when I'm being harassed, targeted by ICE, for example. So we see a lot of that, especially, you know, when we have these communities. We have some of our clients being terrorized right at their doorstep, right where they work, going to the gas station and being confronted with these very ugly, horrific, scary situations, and you know, just giving themselves up because they don't know they had a right.
Yeah.
They didn't know, you know, I didn't have to talk to this guy. I didn't have to open my door. I didn't have to say anything. And for us, it's like, oh, how do we cater to those needs? How do we reach more people with this knowledge? And I think Marshall Brennan really sort of it's great at filling that gap in the services, that legal services that we need in New Mexico.
Yeah, you touched on something I think very important in terms of the gap, because Lalita, you were talking earlier about how it's easy to come to law school and get so focused on the process of analysis, so focused on just making it through your doctrinal courses day after day, and if we're not intentional about it, then we won't reach what I consider that next level of analysis of, okay, so this is how things are. How can the way in which things are affect how things should be, at least the way I think they should be. And this, I think back to moments in my class when I was a teaching fellow, where we talked about real life situations. We talked about the state of New Mexico and the state of the United States, and how this was even relevant to the topics that we were discussing in terms of constitutional law, and they're totally relevant. Preston was telling a story in the last episode about how a gentleman had made this comment that you only need to know your rights if you're a bad person. And I think that, you know, just nationwide, there needs to be a shift that, no, these rights were fought for, these rights were delineated, and these rights are ours to enjoy if we're in this country. And so I think that's a great element that we get in this program, the opportunity to expose people to the broader perspective, if you will, of you had these coming in. You may not have known anything about them, but they're in your toolbox, and you get to use them. And I think there's at least for me, sometimes there's this hang up, but do I really get to? Like, I know we're doing this role play, but will it really work in real life? You know? And yeah, because this is how it's supposed to be, even if that's not how it's looked up to this point.
Yeah.
You know?
And if I can type back a little bit, sometimes you get a text or a call or an email from one of the past high school students. They need a reference, they need a letter or something. And sometimes it's, hey, I got in trouble. What do I do? You know, I need some guidance. And also, you know, sort of still being there for these students that you've built a relationship, in my time, at least, for the program. So
absolutely
maintaining that contact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember, I think it was at the orientation that you did, Lalita, that you framed that well, in that as a teaching fellow, it isn't necessarily your role to become their lifelong mentor in terms of helping them, but you're available to if that's what you want to do. And so you create that great space. And I think about one of my students who I was able to help with a scholarship application, first gen now at UNM, and it's so rewarding because it goes beyond the classroom. And I think the reality too is that they're not all sweet stories, because one of the ones that comes to mind for me is there was the semester that I was teaching, there was a student in the class who who was in and out of the class and not really engaged, and we really fought to try and engage him because we care. I mean, everyone who comes to the class, you care about every single one of those. Even if they don't care about you, they somehow they win your heart, right, just by being there. And so we end that semester. The next sometime down the road, I'm in the clinic here at UNM School of Law, the required 6 credit hour clinic that we take part in. And I remember that day I was at Children's Court, and I was walking out of Children's Court, and I saw that same student walking into Children's Court, and I'm just like, oh man. And you know, we kept it light. Hey, how you doing? Good to see you. But it just, for me, it highlighted the importance of a program like Marshall Brennan. And perhaps it's true we can't reach everyone, but by us reaching out, that's plenty then compared to what was happening with us not reaching out at all. So it's essential. This program is and I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that this program becomes a lifeline for some students who we get to touch, you know, just educationally. And so it's awesome that we have that privilege of being in that space, and to do so before we even get admitted to the New Mexico bar. We're not even practitioners yet, but we're already influencing in a positive way.
Yeah, and I think you touched on it, you know, this idea of the pipelining students. And I think, Sal, you and I have had this conversation in the past, right, about representation, and for students seeing people that look like them reflected, and like, look at these guys, right? They're going to college, they're in a graduate program, they're going to be lawyers. So sort of seeing that it's important, and I think sort of inspirational for these young people to see women, you know, sort of pursuing these careers, seeing people of color, you know, also pursuing these careers, places where we're not expected to be seen, places where we're not expected to succeed. And in some way we're informing them, right? There are options, right? There is more out there. And you don't necessarily need to go to law school. You don't necessarily need to be a lawyer, but there are options. There's other things that you can explore and do. So it's great in that way.
Absolutely. And I think everything that Eddie said, and the opportunity to come to the law school, this building that maybe the whole concept seems intimidating, and then you're practicing in a classroom and that looks like a courtroom, and to make it feel real and like accessible and possible. And right, it doesn't have to be law school, but I think there are definitely also high school students who find their confidence, or they find something inside themselves that they didn't know was there through the program. You know, I've definitely seen that and heard stories of students who maybe just didn't think of themselves as being good at school, or they didn't think of themselves as really having potential, or they hadn't, and really, I mean, that's on the adults around them. Adults around them had failed to see or help them find their potential before, but or you know, they hadn't had that opportunity, but finding some confidence that they didn't realize, or getting up and arguing and doing well, and realizing that they have some skill or something inside them that I think can really change somebody's life at that stage.
Yeah, that's powerful. I wanna touch on this before we run out of time. There's this authenticity that both of you bring to the table. I mean, you bring to life, period. But I'm sure you bring to practice as well. I don't get to be in the office with you all, but I saw it during law school. And you know, one thing you say, Lalita, is you call yourself a nerd, and and it's funny because I don't know if anyone told you this, but when we got to the end, for those of you who are unfamiliar, at the end of law school we have these awards called the Woody Awards, and they're these unofficial awards that we give to individuals who demonstrate some noticeable characteristic. And there was one that had to do with constitutional law, and so many of the leaders who were in that decision-making process were in my same clinic. And I just remember, I don't want to say the wrong person said it, but I remember someone saying, there's just some people who get it when it comes to constitutional law. And they were talking about you, Lalita. They were talking about you. And you just really bring that. I remember so many moments in civil procedure where I had no clue what was going on, because I thought, I'm going to go criminal law. I don't need this stuff. And that came back to bite me. So don't take that approach. Be open. But there were so many moments where you came through, like Professor Aquilino would pose the question to the class, and you look around, I'd be like, please, someone answer. Please, someone answer. Lalita! And you always had this distinct way of saying your name, too. Lalita.
He did. Yeah. I really liked that. I remember that.
And so it became music to my ears. So like, yes, Lalita is going to answer. And then for you, Eddie, there were just so many moments. Even right now, that I don't know if we can maybe put the camera on later, but you're wearing some great kicks right now.
Thank you.
Like hashtag respect the drip. Kind of, yeah, right?
Sneaker game.
Yeah.
Sneaker game going strong. And there were moments where you and I, we just crossed paths in the law school. We'd be wearing our J's.
Right.
And we were
Jordans
just, for those who don't know, Jordans.
The late people.
Yeah.
The late people.
And we'd be like, that's right, we're not going to let this place change us.
Exactly.
Like, we know who we are.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, and both of you really brought that to law school and continue to bring that to Marshall Brennan and to your practices. So I want to throw that in there, that for whoever the next director is, there's some big shoes to fill. There's no pressure to wear J's to class, but if you want to wear them in your free time, please do.
I feel like I should probably start wearing them, right?
It's never too late to embrace the lifestyle. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. You can get on this.
I don't know though. I don't know if it would be authentic. I gotta work up to it. Maybe.
That's right. Yeah.
But
steps.
You know,
there's room to grow.
Yeah.
There's room to grow.
For sure.
I don't know if you guys noticed the state motto for New Mexico is "We grow as we go."
What?
Isn't that cool?
I didn't know that.
It's in line. It's Cresci Eundo. Forgive me if I pronounced that wrong.
Wow.
But yeah, isn't that cool?
I don't think I knew we had a state motto.
Oh yeah, it's out there.
Wow.
It's
I like it. I dig
really
it.
like that.
I'm into it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that we can continue to speak that over Marshall Brennan, that we're going to continue to grow as we go. And from someone who's been in a student position and never as a director, I want to say thank you on behalf of all the students, law students and high school students whom you have impacted because of your dedication, because of your commitment, right? So when you're putting that lesson plan together, when you're writing out that syllabus, when you're finding the different content for what to include, like I'm sure it doesn't necessarily cross your mind in that moment of wow, someone's gonna be grateful for this. Like, you know, maybe even the opposite. Oh, they're gonna be mad they have more reading. But no, we really are grateful, and that remains Marshall Brennan for me remains one of the major highlights of my law school experience, because it was that opportunity to bring law school to others who perhaps never saw it in their vision.
Yeah, and I just want to shout out Matthew Bernstein and Preston, who did this before, were wonderful. And I know Preston had his episode, which was great, and I listened to it, and being in the director role has given me so much more appreciation for what both of them did, and hearing Preston talk about starting the program, and of course it was so much work and so much passion and dedication on his part. So just, you know, extra shout out. And I am so lucky that he's in our office now at the ACLU, so I get to pop in and be like, Preston, help, what do I do about this Marshall Brennan thing? But just, yeah, I mean, he's deserves so much credit for everything that he did to get this program going.
Yeah, big shout out to Matthew and to Preston. Big up to the homies. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm excited about Lalita, how she's gonna like grow the program and make it succeed. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. This is great. Oh, any final plugs to law students who may be watching this right now?
Do it. Just gotta do it. It's an amazing program, and it just how much it's gonna challenge you and just change your perspective on the law school experience. Yeah,
exactly. Just do it. And I'm going to bet that we could survey all of the Marshall Brennan students, fellows that have maybe ever done this program since it's been at UNM, and I doubt you find one that regrets having taken the class.
Whoa.
I'm just saying, I'm putting it out there as a bet.
If you're a former fellow watching this video, I would encourage you to connect with Lalita to see how you can support her as she continues as director. And I really love what you said about reaching rural areas. I don't know how to do that just yet, but you know, there are students who come to our law school from rural areas who will return to rural areas, and I think there's the possibility right there. Yeah. So reach out. I will put their contact info below this video, and with that, thank you both for coming on the show. Love you both, and
thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, definitely.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. It's great.
And doing this is so cool that this is happening, this podcast. And
yeah.
Well, you heard it from them. Just do it. Nike, just do it. And with that, we're out.